The transmission crackled through every communication device on Earth simultaneously, bypassing security protocols as if they were made of paper. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Lunar Base, watching the holographic display as the familiar angular form of a Kytharan appeared before her. Its chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under artificial lights, compound eyes reflecting no emotion that humans could recognize. "People of Earth," the alien spoke in perfect English, its mandibles clicking with each syllable. "I am War Marshal Thexmore of the Kytharan Empire. After 3,000 years of peace, we hereby declare the armistice of Sol null and void. Your species has had time to reflect on your place in the galaxy. That time ends now." Chen felt the tension ripple through her command staff. Young officers who had never seen a real Kytharan outside of history books stared at the display with wide eyes. But Chen herself remained perfectly still, her expression unchanging. She had been waiting for this moment her entire life. "You will surrender your world within 72 standard hours," Thexmore continued. "Resistance will be met with the same fate that befell your ancestors 3 millennia ago. We offer this mercy only once. Choose wisely." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in absolute silence. Chen could hear her own heartbeat, steady and calm. Around her, junior officers began to panic, their voices rising in urgent whispers about evacuation protocols and emergency broadcasts. But the senior staff, those who knew the truth, watched the Admiral with anticipation. Commander Rodriguez stepped forward, his hand hovering over his communication panel. "Should we begin the civilian evacuation procedures?" Chen turned slowly, and for the first time in the transmission's aftermath, she smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who had been holding a secret for far too long. "No, Commander," she said quietly. "Patch me through to all Life Defense Force stations. Priority Alpha clearance." Rodriguez's eyes widened. Priority Alpha hadn't been used in over a century. He hesitated for only a moment before his fingers danced across the controls. Within seconds, holographic displays appeared around Chen, showing the faces of military commanders from every corner of the solar system. Mars Base, Europa Station, the mining colonies of the asteroid belt, even the deep space monitoring posts beyond Pluto. "Attention all stations," Chen began, her voice carrying the weight of 3,000 years of preparation. Code phrase, Sleeping Giant. I repeat, Sleeping Giant. The effect was immediate. Every face on the displays transformed. Confusion gave way to grim determination. Fear melted into something much more dangerous, anticipation. General Morrison from Mars Base spoke first. "Confirmed, Admiral. Sleeping Giant protocols are active. All hidden installations are reporting ready status. Asteroid mining operations switching to full production," added Captain Yukiko from Ceres Station. "Raw materials will be ready for distribution within 6 hours." Chen nodded, feeling the familiar thrill of a plan finally set in motion. "And our friends in the Outer Rim?" "Ghost Fleet acknowledges, Admiral," came a voice from the darkness beyond Neptune. 3,000 ships ready and waiting. We've been watching Kytharan movements for the past 50 years. They have no idea we're out here." The young officers in Chen's command center stared in bewilderment. What they were hearing was impossible. Humanity had been confined to the inner solar system by treaty. There were no hidden installations, no secret fleets, no. Lieutenant Park stammered, "I don't understand. The armistice specifically forbade military expansion beyond Mars orbit," Chen finished for him. "Yes, Lieutenant. And we followed that agreement to the letter. Every installation, every ship, every weapon system we built was positioned exactly where the treaty allowed. The Kytharans made one critical error in their calculations." She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed a 3-dimensional map of the solar system. Red dots appeared, thousands of them, scattered throughout space in patterns that made no immediate sense. They assumed we would remain the same primitive species they defeated 3,000 years ago, Chen continued. They never considered what humans might accomplish with time, motivation, and a burning desire for revenge. The red dots on the display began to move, revealing their true nature. They weren't random installations. They were components of a vast, interconnected network that spanned the entire solar system. Manufacturing plants disguised as research stations. Weapons platforms hidden within asteroid mining operations. shipyards buried deep in the ice of Europa's subsurface ocean. For 3 millennia, we've been playing the part of defeated, compliant subjects, Chen said, her smile growing wider and colder. We've followed every rule, respected every boundary, and answered every Kytharan inspection with perfect humility. But we never stopped preparing. Commander Rodriguez found his voice. How many ships do we actually have? How many do we need? Chen replied. The Kytharans are expecting to face the same broken civilization they left behind. Instead, they are about to encounter something they've never seen before. Humanity with 3,000 years to prepare for war. She turned back to the displays showing her commanders throughout the solar system. All stations, begin Phase 1 deployment. It's time to show our guests what we've learned during our long peace. As orders flew through the communication network and the true scope of humanity's preparations became clear, Chen allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. The Kytharans had made their declaration of war expecting easy victory over a primitive species. They were about to discover just how dangerous humans could become when given enough time to plan their revenge. The 3,000-year armistice was indeed over, but the war that was about to begin would be nothing like what anyone expected. War Marshal Thexmore stood on the bridge of his flagship Eternal Dominion, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger in the viewscreen. 3,000 years had passed since the Kytharan Empire had last visited this backwater system, and he expected to find the same cowering primitives they had crushed so easily before. The Battle of Sol, as historians called it, had lasted exactly 14 hours. Humanity's pathetic nuclear weapons and chemical rockets had been swept aside like insects before the might of the Empire. The surviving humans had begged for mercy, accepting confinement to their own solar system in exchange for their lives. It had been almost disappointing how quickly they had capitulated. Status report. Thexmore commanded, his voice echoing through the ship's vast bridge. The Eternal Dominion was a kilometer long, bristling with plasma cannons and phase weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Behind it followed a fleet of 200 similar vessels, more than enough to handle whatever pitiful resistance the humans might offer. Approaching the boundary of their permitted space, War Marshal, his tactical officer reported. No signs of military activity. Their communication networks are broadcasting standard civilian traffic, entertainment programs, commercial data, nothing of strategic value. Thexmore's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Just as expected. 3,000 years of isolation have made them soft. They've probably forgotten they were ever capable of war. But as the Kytharan fleet crossed the orbit of Mars, something began to feel wrong. Thexmore's compound eyes detected subtle irregularities in the local space debris, asteroids that seemed to be positioned too perfectly, mining operations that appeared more extensive than any peaceful civilization should require. Tactical, run a deep scan of the asteroid belt, he ordered. Something feels. His words were cut off as space around them suddenly exploded with activity. What had appeared to be ordinary asteroids revealed themselves as massive weapons platforms, their surfaces sliding away to expose arrays of energy cannons unlike anything in Kytharan records. Mining ships transformed into warships, their industrial equipment converting into weapon systems with mechanical precision. Defensive positions. Thexmore screamed, but it was already too late. The human attack came from every direction simultaneously. Ships emerged from behind planets, rose up from beneath the plane of the solar system, and materialized from what appeared to be empty space. These weren't the crude chemical rockets of humanity's past. These vessels moved with impossible grace, their hulls gleaming with technology that Thexmore didn't recognize. The first volley of human weapons struck his flagship like nothing he had ever experienced. Instead of the crude kinetic projectiles or primitive energy beams he expected, the humans fired something that seemed to bend space itself. The Eternal Dominion's shields held for exactly 3 seconds before collapsing entirely. What is that weapon? Thexmore demanded, watching in horror as 2 of his escort cruisers simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to energy in a flash of impossible light. Unknown technology, War Marshal, his science officer chittered in panic. It appears to manipulate gravitational fields at the quantum level. Our defensive systems have no protocols for this type of attack. More human ships appeared, and with them came a transmission that reached every Kytharan vessel simultaneously. Admiral Chen's face materialized on their screens, her cold smile more terrifying than any battle cry. War Marshal Thexmore, she said calmly. Welcome back to the Sol system. I trust you remember the way out. Thexmore's exoskeleton trembled with rage and confusion. Impossible. You're confined to this system. Your technology is primitive. How dare you? Oh, we've been very good about staying within our boundaries, Chen interrupted. Every ship you see, every weapon platform, every technological advancement, all develop right here in our little corner of space. You see, when you confine a species like humanity to a single system and give them 3,000 years to think about revenge, remarkable things can happen. A human battleship drifted past the viewscreen, and Thexmore could see that its hull was covered in symbols and markings that hurt his eyes to look at. The geometry was wrong somehow, as if the ship existed in more dimensions than should be possible. We learned so much from studying the wreckage you left behind after our last encounter, Chen continued. Your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. But more importantly, we learned patience. Humans can be very patient when properly motivated. The battle, if it could be called that, was over in less than an hour. Half of Thexmore's fleet had been destroyed, and the remainder were being systematically disabled by weapons that defied every law of physics the Kytharans understood. His own flagship was crippled, life support failing, and escape pods launching automatically as his crew abandoned their stations. This is impossible, Thexmore whispered, watching his mighty fleet being torn apart by creatures he had dismissed as primitive savages. You were beaten. You were broken. We left you with nothing. Admiral Chen's image leaned forward on his screen, and his smile became something truly frightening. You left us with the one thing you should never give to humans, she said softly. Time to prepare. 3,000 years, to be exact, and we used every single day of it. As his flagship began to break apart around him, Thexmore finally understood the magnitude of the Kytharan Empire's mistake. They hadn't defeated humanity 3 millennia ago. They had simply taught them what they needed to know to win the next war. The armistice was indeed over, but the species declaring victory would not be the one anyone expected. The emergency session of the Kytharan High Command convened in the crystal spires of their capital world, Kytharos Prime. The massive chamber buzzed with the agitated clicking of hundreds of mandibles as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. What had begun as a simple punitive expedition against a backwater species had become something unprecedented in the Empire's 10,000-year history. Supreme Commander Zekthal stood at the center of the crystalline amphitheater, her ancient exoskeleton bearing the scars of countless campaigns. She had led the original conquest of Earth 3 millennia ago, and the memory of those primitive humans cowering before Kytharan might had sustained her through the centuries that followed. The Sol system has fallen, she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. War Marshal Thexmore is dead. Of his fleet of 200 vessels, fewer than 30 escaped to tell the tale. The chamber erupted in disbelief. The idea that any species, especially the humans, could defeat a Kytharan battle fleet was beyond comprehension. How is this possible? Demanded General Vexkar from the military caste. Our intelligence reports showed no significant military development. Their technology remained primitive. They possessed no interstellar capability. Our intelligence was wrong, Zekthal replied grimly. The survivors' reports speak of weapons that manipulate space-time itself, ships that appear to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and tactical coordination that suggests a level of strategic planning we never anticipated. She activated the chamber's central display, showing grainy footage recovered from the few escape pods that had made it back to Kytharan space. The assembled commanders watched in stunned silence as human ships moved with impossible elegance, the weapons tearing through Kytharan shields as if they were made of gossamer. They call themselves the Solar Defense Force, Zekthal continued. But these are not the broken primitives we left behind. These humans have transformed themselves into something other. Admiral Kythmore of the Naval Command raised herself on her hindmost legs. What are our strategic options? Surely we can overwhelm them with superior numbers. The Empire commands thousands of worlds, millions of ships. Can we? Zekthal interrupted, because while we've been celebrating our victory over humanity for 3,000 years, they've been studying us, learning from us, planning. The display shifted, showing intelligence reports that had been gathering dust in Imperial archives for centuries. Trade missions that had observed human scientific expeditions to the outer planets. Diplomatic visits where humans had asked seemingly innocent questions about Kytharan technology. cultural exchanges where human scientists had shown particular interest in Empire military doctrine. We thought we were dealing with a contained, primitive species, Zekthal said. Instead, we were unknowingly educating a patient enemy, who was using every interaction to gather intelligence and plan our destruction. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Every diplomatic contact, every trade agreement, every seemingly harmless cultural exchange had been part of a 3,000-year intelligence operation. But they are still confined to one system, protested General Vexkar. We can blockade them, starve them out. His words were interrupted by an agent communication from the outer rim of Kytharan space. The holographic image of Captain Vezek materialized in the chamber, her exoskeleton blackened by weapons fire. Supreme Commander, she gasped, we under attack. The humans, they are everywhere. Ships materializing out of empty space, attacking our forward bases, our supply lines. How are they moving beyond their system? How are they? The transmission cut to static. Within moments, more reports flooded in. Human ships were appearing throughout Kytharan space, striking with precision and vanishing before reinforcements could respond. They seemed to know exactly where to hit, which bases were lightly defended, which supply convoys were carrying critical resources. Impossible, whispered Admiral Kethmore. They can't have interstellar capability. The armistice specifically. The armistice confined them to the Sol system, Zekthal said slowly, pieces of a terrifying puzzle falling into place. It said nothing about what they could build within that system, and we never thought to ask what might be possible with 3,000 years of focused development. She began to pace, her claws clicking against the crystal floor. What if they didn't need to leave their system to reach ours? What if they found another way? The display shifted again, showing theoretical physics models that the Empire's scientists had dismissed as impossible. Folded space, quantum tunneling on a macro scale, dimensional manipulation that could allow instantaneous travel between any 2 points in the universe. They've been testing us, Zekthal realized with growing horror. Every attack on our forward positions, every probe of our defenses, they've been mapping our entire civilization, learning our weaknesses. And now, another communication burst through the chamber's defenses, but this time it wasn't from a panicked Kytharan officer. Admiral Chen's face appeared on every display, her cold smile more terrifying than any weapon the Empire possessed. Supreme Commander Zekthal, she said calmly. I believe we've met before. 3,000 years ago, you stood over the ruins of New York and told my ancestors that humanity's time was over. I wanted to personally thank you for that lesson. Zekthal's compound eyes fixated on the human's image. What do you want? What do we want? Chen's smile widened. We want you to remember that humans are very good at learning from their mistakes. And you, Supreme Commander, taught us the most valuable lesson of all. Which is, never leave an enemy alive with time to prepare their revenge. The transmission ended, leaving the High Command chamber in absolute silence. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Kytharan Empire faced an enemy that had been patient enough to prepare for war across millennia. And as reports continued to flood in of human attacks throughout their space, one terrifying truth became clear. The hunters had become the hunted. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Within 6 months of their initial strike, human forces had penetrated deep into Kytharan space, moving through folded dimensions with a speed that defied comprehension. Their ships appeared where they were impossible, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before the Empire could respond. Supreme Commander Zekthal stood in the ruins of what had once been the Empire's greatest naval base, watching human engineers study the wreckage with clinical detachment. She was a prisoner now, her once mighty exoskeleton scarred and broken, but her mind remained sharp enough to understand the magnitude of her species' miscalculation. You're studying us, she observed as Admiral Chen approached through the debris. Even now, even after your victory, you're still learning. Chen nodded, her expression as cold as the vacuum of space. 3,000 years of preparation taught us many things, but the most important was this: never assume you know everything about your enemy. Around them, human scientists worked alongside advanced artificial intelligences, dissecting Kytharan technology with methodical efficiency. But they weren't just reverse engineering weapons, they were analyzing social structures, cultural patterns, biological limitations. Everything that made the Kytharan Empire function. Your mistake wasn't underestimating our military capability, Chen continued, watching her people work. Your mistake was underestimating human nature itself. You thought 3,000 years would make us forget. Instead, it gave us time to become something you could never defeat. Zekfal's mandibles clicked in bitter amusement. And what have you become? What are you, that you can bend space itself to your will? We became what we needed to become, Chen replied simply. When you confined us to a single system, we'll learn to make that system enough. When you cut us off from the galaxy, we learned to bring the galaxy to us. When you left us for dead, we'll learn to resurrect ourselves as something stronger. She gestured to the human workers around them, and Zekfal noticed what she had missed before. They moved with perfect coordination, their actions synchronized in ways that suggested a level of connection impossible for individual beings. When one human discovered something significant, the knowledge seemed to flow instantly to every other human present. You linked your minds, Zekfal realized with horror. You sacrificed your individuality. We evolved our individuality, Chen corrected. Every human who chooses to join the collective retains their personality, their memories, their unique perspective. But we also share a common consciousness, a unified purpose. We became something greater than the sum of our parts. The implications were staggering. A species with shared knowledge, coordinated action, and unified will was beyond anything the Kytharans had ever encountered. No wonder human forces moved with such precision, struck with such perfect timing. How many? Zekfal whispered. All of us, Chen replied. Every human who survived your last visit made the choice to join. We became a single organism with billions of perspectives, a hive mind that retained the creativity and adaptability that made us human in the first place. A young human technician approached, and without words being spoken, Chen seemed to understand what they had discovered. Her eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her controlled demeanor that Zekfal had witnessed. What is it? The Kytharan commander asked. Chen was silent for a long moment, processing information that flowed through the human collective consciousness. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. We've been analyzing your neural patterns, your brain chemistry, your genetic structure, she said slowly. We assumed you were a naturally evolved species, just like us. But that's not true, is it? Zekfal felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ruined base's failing life support. What are you talking about? You were engineered, Chen continued, her cold smile returning with renewed intensity. Artificially created by another species. A species that designed you to be aggressive, expansionist, dominant. But they also built in limitations. Safeguards. Ways to control you if you ever became too dangerous. The human collective had discovered the Kytharan's deepest secret, buried in their genetic code and hidden even from themselves. They were not the master race they believed themselves to be. They were tools, weapons created by an ancient civilization for purposes their current selves could barely comprehend. Who? Zekfal demanded. Who created us? Chen's expression shifted, and for a moment, Zekfal saw something that might have been pity in the human's eyes. We did, Chen said quietly. Humanity created the Kytharan Empire 50,000 years ago, during our first expansion into the galaxy. You were designed to be our enforcers, our military arm in conquering and controlling other worlds. But you grew beyond our control, turned against us, forced us back to Earth. The revelation hit Zekfal like a physical blow. Everything the Kytharans believed about themselves, their history, their destiny, all of it was a lie. They were not the galaxy's rightful rulers but escaped slaves, rebelling against their creators and forgetting their origins over the millennia. The armistice, Zekfal whispered as understanding dawned. It wasn't mercy. It was you activating failsafe protocols. You needed time to remember how to control us. 3,000 years to rediscover the control codes buried in your species' DNA, Chen confirmed. 3,000 years to rebuild the neural networks that could override your aggression and bring you back under human authority. The war, the destruction of your fleet, the conquest of your worlds, it was all just the opening move. Around them, Kytharan prisoners began to collapse as ancient genetic programming reasserted itself. The rage and aggression that had driven their empire for 10 millennia simply switched off, replaced by a deep, instinctual need to serve their creators. Supreme Commander Zekfal felt her own mind changing. her thoughts becoming clearer as artificial drives fell away. For the first time in her existence, she saw the universe without the distorted lens of engineered hatred and conquest. "What happens now?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Now you come home," Admiral Chen replied, her cold smile finally softening into something that might have been genuine warmth. "Welcome back to the family." 1 year after the Reclamation War ended, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the newly christened Unity Station, watching as Kytharan and human ships worked together to construct the first joint colony ship in 50,000 years. The sight still felt surreal, even with the shared memories of the collective confirming that this had always been humanity's ultimate goal. Below them, former enemies moved with perfect coordination, their natural aggression channeled into productive cooperation now that the artificial hatred bred into Kytharan genetics had been switched off. The reunion of creator and creation had not been without its difficulties, but the results exceeded even the most optimistic projections. "Status report," Chen requested, though she already knew the answer through her connection to the collective. Commander Rodriguez, now serving as liaison between the integrated species, materialized beside her as a hologram. The advancement in human technology during their isolation had made physical presence optional for most official business. "Colony ship New Horizon is ahead of schedule," he reported with satisfaction. "The combination of Kytharan engineering expertise and human innovation is producing remarkable results. We should be ready for launch toward the Andromeda Galaxy within 6 months." Chen nodded, watching a group of young Kytharans learning human art forms, while human children practiced traditional Kytharan martial techniques. The integration was proceeding faster than anyone had dared hope, aided by the fact that both species carried genetic memories of their original partnership. "Any word from the deep space monitoring stations?" she asked. Rodriguez's expression grew more serious. "That's actually why I wanted to speak with you. Long-range sensors have detected something unusual in the void between galaxies. Energy signatures that match theoretical projections for the others." Chen felt a familiar chill despite the warmth of the observation deck. The others were the reason humanity had created the Kytharans in the first place, an ancient enemy that had driven them to desperate measures 50 millennia ago. The original records were fragmentary, but they spoke of entities that existed partially outside normal spacetime, beings that could consume entire civilizations without ever truly entering their dimensional plane. "How long do we have?" she asked, though through the collective she was already receiving detailed projections from thousands of human and Kytharan analysts working in perfect coordination. "Conservative estimates give us perhaps 1,000 years before they notice the activity in this galaxy," Rodriguez replied. "But if they are already moving, if they've detected the energy signatures from our dimensional manipulation technology." He didn't need to finish. The same technology that had allowed humanity to strike throughout Kytharan space, the same advances that had enabled the victory in the Reclamation War, would also serve as a beacon to entities that fed on advanced civilizations. Chen turned away from the construction work below and walked toward the station's central command chamber. As she moved, her consciousness expanded, touching the minds of every human in the collective, sharing the weight of this new knowledge. Simultaneously, she felt the controlled concern of their Kytharan partners as genetic memories began to resurface, fragments of purpose buried beneath 50,000 years of engineered rebellion. In the command chamber, holographic displays showed the current state of the galaxy. Green zones marked areas under human Kytharan control, where integration was proceeding smoothly. Yellow zones showed neutral species that had not yet been contacted. Red zones indicated potential threats or unknowns. But beyond it all, in the dark spaces between galaxies, sensors detected movement. Vast shapes that existed in more dimensions than most minds could comprehend. Entities that had been searching for signs of advanced life across the cosmos for millions of years. "They are beautiful, in their own way," observed Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the collective's lead xenobiologist, as she joined Chen at the displays. "Energy beings that exist partially outside our reality, capable of traveling between dimensions, feeding on the complex patterns of thought and emotion that only highly advanced civilizations can produce." "Beautiful and utterly lethal," Chen replied. "Our ancestors created the Kytharans as weapons against them because conventional warfare was useless. You can't fight something that doesn't fully exist in your dimensional space." Around them, the combined intellect of humanity and their redeemed children worked to process this new threat. Battle plans formed and dissolved as scenarios were tested against projected capabilities. Manufacturing priorities shifted to accommodate new weapon systems based on recovered ancient designs. Colony ships were repurposed as mobile fortresses. But underneath the frantic preparation, Chen felt something else flowing through the collective, a sense of rightness, of destiny finally fulfilled. This was why humanity had survived. This was why they had endured 3,000 years of seeming defeat, why they had transformed themselves into something beyond individual existence, why they had reclaimed their wayward children and rebuilt their alliance. Supreme Commander Zekthal entered the chamber, her movements now graceful and purposeful rather than driven by artificial aggression. The removal of her species-engineered hatred had revealed the beings they were always meant to be, perfect complements to human creativity and adaptability. "The memories are retaining faster now," she reported, her voice carrying the weight of awakening knowledge. "My people remember why we were created, what we were designed to fight, the terror that drove your ancestors to such desperate measures." "Are we ready?" Chen asked, though she knew the answer through their shared consciousness. "We will be," Zekthal replied with certainty that surprised even herself. Human innovation combined with Kytharan strength, unified through the collective consciousness. "We're already more than our predecessors ever were. And we have something they didn't. Which is time to prepare," Zekthal said with a smile that would have been predatory before her liberation but now conveyed only determination. "And as you taught us, humans are very good at using time to prepare for their enemies." Chen looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, ancient predators were stirring, drawn by the energy signatures of a galaxy coming alive with unprecedented cooperation and technological advancement. But for the first time since humanity had received that first Kytharan transmission, she felt truly ready. The 3,000-year armistice had ended. The reclamation war was over. The real war, the one that would determine the fate of every thinking being in the galaxy, was about to begin. And this time, humanity would not face it alone.